Good afternoon. My name is Eliana Olivero, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm married to another woman, and I'm a mom of a 15-year-old boy. Also a public English teacher who's really glad to be here today in order to share with you the way two stories can help to understand the realities of many people.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alexander Zapata-Pescador. I am 36 years old. My pronouns are he and him. I am an English teacher in the city of Medellin. And today we're going to share our experience as part of our research project that the topic was critical literacy, exploring the structures of privilege in education. This is the result of our own experience being part of a family, being students in high school, being students in the university, and later became teachers and advocates and allies for the LGBT community, and also trying to understand the structures of privilege in education that we have in this moment. So I hope that everyone enjoys this presentation today.
Well, our agenda starts with our concept of queer critical literacy. Then we talk about the importance of knowing about the heteronormativity and cisgender privilege and the acronym of LGBTQIA+. We will continue talking of four main conclusions after the analysis of our stories, and we will conclude with the implications of the study.
Before we start with our presentation, we want to welcome everyone to what we are going to do today. And first of all, to start analyzing or reflecting on four ideas that are going to guide the perceptions in our presentation today. During the presentation, we are also find other questions that probably are going to be that input for everyone there listening to reflect on their own experience and the perceptions and the positions that everyone can have. This is also like a dedication for all the LGBTQI plus community in Colombia, for all the people in relation to indigenous communities, gender, ethnicity, situations of poverty, situations of inequity that we can live in our country today. Number one, we want to reflect on, have you ever felt in danger because your preferences and expressions do not fit the expectations of others? Number two, has somebody ever joked about your sexuality or gender expression? Have you ever been in the position to tell everybody about your sexuality, orientation, or gender identification? And finally, have you ever felt that your life is directly related to the type of content in the English class? And I will say in education in general, we want to have this moment as an opportunity to start thinking on your own position. In this presentation, we're going to try to incorporate you to be make you feel part of this presentation, and this is not only like a way that we are just going to share our experience, but we want also that there is a content with the own experience of everyone listening today.
Well, one of our key concepts in this study is queer critical literacy. It is important for us to clarify that although we know that queer has bigger implications, we use the term in order to refer to other ways of living sexuality different to the heterosexual and cisgender conceptions. Queer critical literacy is a fusion between critical literacy and queer theory. Critical literacy has its roots in the work of Paulo Freire. He made visible the possibility for teachers become change agents, the option of dissenting hegemonic structures, and the necessity of questioning what others say we need to live. On the other hand, queer theory gave us the possibility to think of gender and sexual identity in a different way where the convergence is not always a reality.
When we think about those realities that involves queer theory, it's that the constructions of the word are being made from the perception that everybody is heterosexual and everyone is cisgender. Queer theory appears as a need to represent all of the other options different from being heterosexual and cisgender, and to question the construction that as a society we have made through history. When we think about critical literacy, is the opportunity that we have in education to question the materials, the practices, and the different conceptions of sexuality and ways to live that we have created inside of our schools. One of the situations that we have to start thinking, it's about the ideas of living in the privilege. We have to say that probably this is a topic that for many people is still a situation of taboo, or some people consider that it's not very important to start breaking these heteronormative and cisgender assumptions inside of our schools and in the society in general. But we have to be conscious about the privilege that we are living with, right? If we are never being in the position of feel discriminated or feel not part of the different practices that we have in the school, probably it's going to be very difficult to be in the position of others. These ideas of empathy and trying to be in the positions of others make us help that sometimes the creations that we have made in our society, in our families, and even in our schools are just for a privileged part of the community. Just a few people are being feeling the advantage of the situations that are happening in our schools. We have to think that when we think about this heteronormative, makes reference not only to the situations referring to sexual and identification, but also all the additional aspects such as ethnicity, such as gender, such as religion, such as family, such as education, and even the city or the geographical place when we are living. So the idea is to start analyzing what are those positions of privilege that we have. What is the positions of privilege that you, the one that are listening in this moment, are having tonight, today?
Well, it is crucial to know that there are different ways of perceiving and living sexuality. Here in Colombia, the acronym is LGBTI, but we want to make known the acronym that we have found in different papers, in different academic papers, where there are more letters. It's not possible to close the door, and we are diverse. We need to recognize that we are different, and the sign plus give us the opportunity to be included even when there is not another capital letter there for other different ways. And another special thing is that we need to understand the difference between sexual orientation that has to do with our object of desire, gender identity that has to do with the way we perceive ourselves, and the gender expression that encompasses the way we want to be seen by the other. These three concepts are very difficult because they are very next one to the other.
In relation to the acronym, we have to reflect on how much do we know about the meaning of each one of the letters. And this is something that probably the schools haven't paid attention so far. If we ask to some of the teachers, and this is an experience that happened to Eliana and I when in our schools, we tried to talk about the topic and we asked to the different teachers about the meaning of LGBTQI+. It was very difficult to find right answers to what it meant. If that happened in the schools, imagine what happened in our families. So, as the first moment of our journey, we talked about the situations of family as a space for initial LGBTQI plus understanding. As I was mentioned before, if the school doesn't have the tools to talk about these topics, imagine what is the situations of families. This is a cycle that has been repeated for so many years. What we learn from the school is something that probably at families we don't have the opportunity to learn or to understand these topics. In our own experience when we were kids, our families taught uh, about sexual orientation from a vision of being heterosexual and cisgender. We never had the opportunity to learn about being gay, about being lesbian, about being trans, and about being non-binary because we didn't grow up with those concepts in our families. We are not saying that we blame our families for that situation because at the end of the day they didn't have the opportunities of education and they didn't have the opportunities to learn um, the meaning of that in order to transmit that to their children in this case um,
Yes.
as part of the family.
So at school, we learned that family is conceived as the nucleus of society, and it is showed as a goal. The actual school system should change that perspective. What about other type of families or possibilities? At the inner of our families, we learn to reproduce our parents' discourse as they are our models when we are children. Our parents demanded from us heteronormative and cisgender practices. They thought things like pink for girls, blue for boys, car for boys, dolls for girls, and things like that. At the beginning, the influence was so strong that we adopted their ideas as our own ideas, and we projected ourselves as cisgender and heterosexual people. For our parents, being something different to heterosexual was not right. We infer it from the way they referred about LGBTQI plus people. They used to call them names, um, like quebrado, like
Desviado.
florecita, desviado. And at the beginning, the influence of that uh, was so strong that we didn't um, project ourselves in that way, and and that was and that had a terrible like uh, result because at the end we rejected ourselves as a we rejected ourselves. So our parents' language permeates the way we read to and interact with the world, and that risk of making your children reject themselves because they are not the way their parents expect it to be is something that needs to be fixed. um, Critical literacy helps us to understand why our parents thought and act in the way they did. We could heal and we could think better of past situations and break free of possible causes of resentments.
I think that that is the importance of the study in relation to how curricular literacy, even though we focus on the ideas of education and the role of the school, it's also important to understand that the role of the school permeated the ideas and conceptions and structures that the families created. And the family became like the first space for education. It was the first space for practices of literacy, from the way that we interacted with others, for the way that we were exposed to different materials always directed about being cisgender and heterosexual. Right now, we have to think about this concept of family. What is the meaning of family? And I think that we need to discuss this. Like for every single person, what is the conception that they have about family? Because it depends on many different aspects. It depends on the religion, on the tradition, on the geographical space where we are located in this moment. It depends on our own beliefs, right, and perceptions of meaning of family. For our students, for example, when we ask the question, what is a family? Normally, the first thing that they come to your mind is a mother, a father, and a group of children. But we have to understand that queer theory really question this conception and open a lot of different possibilities of what a family means in this moment. Um, so in relation to that, we need to think what is the role of the school? What is the role of the school in relation to these perceptions and conceptions of being a family?
So when we were children, education matched the traditional approaches where teachers were the central part. and what student might think or need was not important. There was no way of establishing a conversation uh, about these topics. And teachers demand, and we gave teachers order, and we obeyed. The use of uniforms was an issue. The shows of affection at school were forbidden. Talk or teach about sexuality out of the heteronormativity was unthinkable, and that left us without access to important information for every human being. Sexuality makes part of our lives. It makes part of our persona. So from queer critical literacy, we learned that the important part is what students think and need. Being queer is a reality that needs to be shown with respect and dignity. We have many LGBTQIA plus students that are eager to talk about their realities in our classrooms, and teachers must work to help all students to question their realities and propose alternatives to reach equity and justice. Teachers can become policymakers too. From their classrooms, they can help to normalize LGBTQI plus realities by giving voice to those students that make part of that population, exposing students to different kind of materials where they not only see the heteronormative but other dissenting forms of experience sexuality and gender.
So the use of materials, as Eliana is saying, it's one of the aspects that we are trying to include here, and it's how our own materials that we design for the class, and when we see, for example, the books and the materials that the Ministry of Education are offering us to developing ideas in English, we barely see or we never see examples or roles or voices of the LGBTQI plus community in those materials. If we don't have the opportunity to see that in the material that we have, it's going to be almost impossible to see them reflected in the different practices that we have in the school. Something as simple as going to a bathroom, that for many people is something that we do every day, and it becomes something very natural and easy and simple. For many of our students and even teachers, it became an issue, it became a problem, it became something that they have to fight with every single day because of the structures of the schools doesn't provide the spaces for everyone. So when we think about these constructions of privilege, we have to see that even a construction, even the daily practices that we have in the schools are given the privilege to just a few parts of the school. And when we think about our manuals of coexistence, we still see that not all the members of the community are being privileged in these manuals of coexistence. This is a construction by students, by teachers, by directors, by families. But sometimes we just forget about the needs that some of our students have, and even our teachers. In relation, for example, to uniforms, accessories, the bathrooms, are things that we take it for granted when we created these manuals of coexistence. We conceive them uh, under the concept that everybody is gender, that everybody is heterosexual, and we just excluded all of the different possibilities that we have in our schools. Um, so it also takes us to the curriculum, right? When we conceive the ideas of curriculum, the topics that we're going to cover in class, and I'm talking about the English class, but also what happened with the other areas of knowledge. There is also the opportunity to include them, all of the different realities of our students in the curriculum that we have. This is part of what we are doing. So the school needs to start thinking about creating new policies. As probably Eliana was saying before, as teachers, we have the opportunity to create policies that are inside of our classroom, but also the school in general has the obligation and probably the responsibility to create those safe spaces for all members of the community. In our experience, for example, we promoted the idea of creating focus groups, diversity groups inside of our schools in order to listen to our students from the LGBTQI plus community about their necessities, about their needs, about the things that they consider were not working well, or those situations or those places when they felt excluded from the normal practices of the school. At the same time, is to understand how the school needs to take an active position and start creating campaigns and start creating different situations in order to change what is not working well.
Well, advocacy was an emerging concept that we noticed and that became relevant as it encompasses the attitude and the actions that need to be taken in order to stop the reproduction of the problems. So, in addition to what Diego was saying on the focus groups, it is important to add that the members of those groups are not only LGBTQIA plus people. We also accept heterosexual and cisgender people to help us with the construction of a new reality for the students in the school. And we have academic goals as teachers, right? But behind those, there are more important ones. Go beyond the classroom is also teaching students to fight hegemonic ideas that are based on weak assumptions. And as language teachers, the proposal of counter narratives can help them to be heard by others that ignore their realities. Now that we know that at home, the majority of parents do not have resources to teach about sexual and gender diversity, schools must cover that blind spot, hoping that students can permeate parents' thoughts using solid arguments. Teachers are agents of change. We can share and construct with our students knowledge that allow them to transform their context in a short or in a long time. We are their models. They learn from our behavior, from our ways of expressing ideas, and from our stance in political situations. We need to be sensitive to what they need and give a hand in complex situations. They need advocates of their causes and allies in their battles so they can feel safe and supported.
In this moment of the presentation, it will be very necessary to ask ourselves how has been the position that we have in front of our students? How has been the position that we assumed when we see situations of discrimination inside of our classroom? We know that this is a topic that for many teachers and even for many schools is still a problem, and is still a moment when you decided probably to avoid the situation because you don't want to get involved in a problem, or you don't want to deal with the opinions of their families, or you don't want to deal with the opinions of principals and coordinators in the school. But as probably this idea of becoming an ally, of becoming an advocate, is also to take like a political position and assumption, because we're thinking about the circumstances that our students are having inside of our classroom, but at the same time all of the members of the community. So the question in this moment is, what is our position? Is my position being visible for my students? My students see me as a role of advocacy, as a role of being an ally. Like, do my students really feel that they can count on us about the situations that are happening to them? Do they feel like confident talking about these topics with us being part of our schools? We know that this is something that is difficult, and probably because of the perceptions and stereotypes that we have created through history, it became something like that. But we also have to analyze what is the representation, the LGBTQI plus representation that we have had through history, and how does it affected positively or probably negatively during our history. The first thing that we need to consider is, what is the meaning of being queer? What is the meaning of being gay, of being lesbian, of being transgender, of being non-binary, and all of the different identities that we can find um, in our realities. So it is very important to analyze that there is not only one way of being, there is not only one perception of being. In our case, for example, although we identify ourselves as lesbian and gay, the experiences of life were very different for the both of us because of different situations, the religion, the families, the schools where we were born, where we studied, sorry, the cities where we were born, our own families, all right, ethnicity. Obviously the experience was completely different, and this is only the example of two people who are sharing the experience with you today. But imagine all of the different possibilities that are open because of the experiences that everyone has is different. So we have to think about this intersectionality, all of the different components that we as people have, right, and how those affect the way that we conceive our own sexuality. When we were kids, we didn't have a lot of representations of the LGBTQI plus community. Probably when we watch television and we would have the opportunity to see something in a movie, the depictions that we saw from were from the American culture, right? Probably the TV shows or the movies that were in fashion in the 90s uh, were from our cultures, but we never had the opportunity to see those role models in Colombia. And when I remember when I grew up, I was watching television with my mother, with my grandmother, and probably all the depictions that we saw there were being heterosexual, being cisgender. We never had the opportunity to see something different from there, and we never had the idea of a different possibility, something different from being heterosexual or being cisgender. So today, the situation is totally different. Teenagers and kids and even adults, they have the opportunity to be represented in different formats. When we watch television, in the streaming services, in music, in social networks. But something that probably for us is very hopeful, and I feel very happy and excited, it's also to see how this representation is also now part of Colombia. We have situations in soap operas or even in reality shows where we can see queer people, when we can see a transgender person, when we can see a kiss between two men. And I think that those are steps that, even though probably are creating um, chaos and many people are giving their opinions that that's not something that should be happening, we know that this is something, a little progress on what will happen before to us. Um, what is the consequence of those representations in media? That is also the opportunity to start include them in the materials that we use in our class. All right, this idea of hacking the heteronormative, this is a concept that John Wargo expresses in his studies. It's that we have the opportunity through our classroom materials to start incorporating new voices and roles that are representing the LGBTQI plus community, and at the same time, as I was mentioning before, the intersectionality also opened the space to talk about problems of ethnicity, about problems of gender, about problems of poverty, about problems of inequity that in Colombia are a topic for everyday class. So it, we really have to think that if our materials are talking about those topics or are just creating spaces for the same roles that we have heard through history: men, heterosexual, white, and cisgender.
Well, the implications of this study are divided into two. The first one has to do with the expanding the field of research in critical literacies in second language by showing the effects and the life implications of making silence about this topic in the classrooms, where we not only teach to develop language competences, but life competences. And the second, regarding ESL instruction and education in Colombia, it's also important to recognize the remarkable role of what a teacher chooses to show in the classroom with their attitudes, materials, and activities to stop discrimination circle. Finally, it empowers teachers to become policymakers and clearly states that the paper is not enough. LGBTQIA plus community deserve equitable realities. And this is a call for the rest of teachers that maybe are not part of LGBTQIA plus people to become advocates and allies of this cause. There are many children who have been discriminated. There are many children who feel scared of talking about their lives. There are many children who have questions about this, and we have the possibility to share with them and to construct with them a healthy and a happy uh, and a happy concept of their sexuality, of their gender identity, and of their gender expression that sometimes uh, like puts them in a spotlight, and they don't see like a way out of that space.
We want to conclude with the presentation, probably making like an invitation to everyone listening. It's like um, we are just sharing our experience. We are just sharing the results of a study that for us was very important because it was like a ethnographic study when we have the opportunity to put ourselves as the participants in this study, and we could only see and understand how the process affected the way that we conceive education, since we were part of a family, since we were students in high school, university students, and now as teachers. What are the actions that we are taking in order to make a difference? I have to admit that before this study, although I identify myself as a gay person, I didn't have the need or the idea that this was an important topic to talk in our classroom, that is something that needed to be mentioned in every single aspect of the school. But now that I have seen the necessities of my students and the realities that we are living, i I feel the necessity to do something, and I feel the necessity to making an active part in what we are doing. So we want to close this presentation with the idea or the question, like, would you like to be an ally? Would you like to be part of creating new spaces for our students? And something important, not only about students, because we are part of a community that is permeated by teachers, by the people who work in the school, by principals, by coordinators, a lot of people who are part of the educational area, and that they also feel discriminated, how the families sometimes continue the same discrimination at home, how the school sometimes is the only space that the students have to feel safe, because at home they don't feel safe with their families. They feel um, that in any moment they are going to be hidden or discriminated by their own families. So the final invitation that we want to do here is, what is the position that we're going to take from today on? Or probably this is something that you have asked before, like what are the actions that as teachers we're going to start implementing? What are the actions that as a school I'm going to start implementing, as the principal, as the coordinator? And also as researchers, we also have to continue with this questioning on how university programs are going to continue incorporating these ideas of critical literacy in our students. We are teachers, and probably many people listening today are in the process of becoming teachers. But what is the real objective of being a teacher? And I'm not only talking about the ESL teacher, I'm talking about teachers in general. What is the real purpose of being a teacher? Um, so if we are not going to face with our students their own realities, probably we are just living in the literal part of being a teacher, just transmitting an idea of knowledge. But probably the idea here today and what we want to say is that the realities of the world is part of that education. And if we are not going to talk about that, we are not going to go deeper in what the real necessities of our students are. So we just want to thank everyone for listening today, and we hope that probably this presentation and our experience in life can help many people out there.
So thanks. We have there our contacts if you want to write uh, to us to our emails. And thanks a lot for the opportunity to share with you uh, this part of our life.